Shaquille O'Neal had just finished an exciting day in New York City. As a basketball legend and a household name, his schedule was always packed with events, appearances, and meet and greets with fans. Today had been no different. After a long session of signing autographs and taking photos with excited fans, Shaquille felt a sense of satisfaction. But he also felt a growing need for peace away from the constant attention. So, as the evening drew near, he decided to take the subway back to his hotel. The bustling streets of Manhattan were familiar, but the thought of a quiet train ride was a welcome change. He was dressed casually, wearing a simple hoodie and jeans, trying to blend in and avoid drawing attention. When he stepped onto the platform, the sounds of the city faded as he boarded the train. The subway car was crowded, as usual, with people coming home after work or heading out for the evening. The mix of tired commuters, teenagers chatting away, and the distant hum of the train itself created a backdrop that felt strangely comforting. Shaquille found a spot near the middle of the car, close to a row of empty seats, and sat down. His tall frame took up more space than he would have liked, and he quickly adjusted, trying to minimize any inconvenience to the other passengers. The ride started as uneventful as he had hoped. People were absorbed in their phones, reading, or simply staring out the windows. The train moved through the familiar tunnels of New York's underground, and Shaquille leaned back slightly. He could hear the sounds of the train wheels clacking along the tracks, a constant rhythm that seemed to slow his thoughts. It was then that the doors to the next station opened, and an elderly woman stepped onto the train. She was hunched over slightly, her hand gripping a cane for support, and her pace was slow. She seemed to be in her late 70s or early 80s, and as she entered the crowded car, it was clear she had difficulty walking. She paused for a moment, surveying the passengers, but no one made a move to offer her a seat. It was a common sight on the subway. People absorbed in their world, lost in their thoughts or the distraction of their phones, oblivious to the needs of those around them. But for Shaquille, this moment felt different. He watched as the elderly woman took another step forward, her face showing signs of fatigue and effort. She was struggling, and it pained him to see how others did not seem to notice her discomfort. The train jerked forward as it started moving again, and the elderly woman nearly lost her balance. Her grip on the cane tightened, and she steadied herself against a pole. Shaquille's eyes followed her, his heart going out to her. He had seen the signs of aging, the fragility that time brought, and someone who had experienced his fair share of physical challenges during his basketball career, he could relate. He knew what it felt like to need a little extra support from others. Shaquille knew that he could do something about it. He stood up from his seat. He moved closer to the elderly woman, who was still holding onto her cane, her eyes now scanning the crowd for a place to sit. As he approached her, Shaquille smiled gently, trying to ease any discomfort she might feel from the sudden attention. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said softly. "Please take my seat." The elderly woman looked up in surprise, her wrinkled face lighting up with gratitude. She hesitated for a moment, as though she wasn't sure how to react to such an unexpected gesture. Shaquille could see that she was not used to being offered help in this way, but her hesitation lasted only a moment before she nodded with a soft, appreciative smile. "Thank you, young man." "Mud," she said with a voice that was both frail and warm, as she slowly lowered herself onto the seat. The elderly woman, now seated and visibly more at ease, looked up at Shaquille again. "You're very kind," as she said softly, her eyes filled with warmth. Shaquille smiled back. "It's no problem at all. I'm very happy to help." Uh, as the elderly woman settled into the seat, Shaquille O'Neal took a step back and stood by the door, leaning slightly against the pole to steady himself. The only sound that filled the space was the rhythmic clattering of the train wheels as they sped through the tunnels beneath New York City. For a moment, the elderly woman, now sitting comfortably, closed her eyes and let out a soft sigh of relief. Shaquille watched her with a sense of quiet understanding. He could see how tired she was, how the weight of years and life's challenges had begun to take their toll on her. He knew that feeling, the kind of exhaustion that goes beyond the physical and seeps into the soul. It was something he'd felt after countless games, after pushing his body to the limit, after all the years of training and playing. But for him, the fatigue had always been temporary, a passing ache, something he could recover from. For her, it seemed as though there was no easy way to bounce back from the weariness that came with age. A few minutes passed in silence, with the train continuing its journey through the city. Shaquille allowed his mind to wander, but he remained aware of the woman sitting beside him. He could hear the soft shuffle of her shoes against the floor as she adjusted her position, the faint rustle of her coat as she tried to get more comfortable. After a while, the man sitting next to her stood up to get off at the next stop. The old woman opened her eyes and sat quietly for a moment. Then she looked at Shaquille, her eyes gentle. "Sit down," as she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Shaquille didn't hesitate. He smiled and sat down next to her. It wasn't long before the elderly woman, feeling more at ease, spoke up again, breaking the silence. Her voice, though frail, held a certain strength, a warmth that made Shaquille smile. "You remind me of my son," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "He was always so thoughtful, just like you, would always help people, even when he didn't have to." Shaquille raised an eyebrow, a little taken aback by her words. "So where is he now?" And her eyes twinkled for a moment, as if she were remembering her son, with a mixture of fondness and sadness. "He passed away some years ago, but I still think about him every day." There was a shift in the air between them as Shaquille listened. "Sorry, I don't know." The woman smiled. "It's okay." The bustling noises of the train car seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the soft murmur of her voice, telling him the story of her son. She explained that she lived alone now, and that her son had been her only family. He had passed away unexpectedly, leaving her to navigate the world alone in her later years. Life had not been easy for her, but she had learned to make do with what she had. Shaquille listened intently, his focus entirely on her, as if there was no one else in the world but the two of them at that moment. As the woman spoke, Shaquille's mind began to race. The loneliness she described was palpable, and Shaquille could sense the longing in her voice. It made him think about the countless older people who, like her, were left to navigate the world alone, with no one to offer them a helping hand or a kind word when they needed it most. After a few moments of silence, as the woman's story came to an end, Shaquille found himself moved by the connection they had made. He felt a deep sense of compassion for this woman, a deep desire to make her life a little easier, to help her in ways that went beyond just offering a seat on the subway. "Can I give you a hug?" Shaquille asked, his voice sincere, his tone soft but resolute. For a moment, the woman seemed surprised by the question, her eyes widening slightly as she processed the request. She hadn't expected this from the tall man who had been so kind to her, a gesture that was more personal than anything she had experienced in a long time. Still, after a brief pause, her features softened, and a small but genuine smile crept onto her face. "Okay," and she said, her voice trembling with a mix of emotions. Shaquille held her gently, but firmly, as if offering a sense of security that she hadn't felt in years. The woman, who had spent so many nights alone, finally felt the warmth of someone else. It wasn't just a hug, it was as if a mother was embracing her son. The deep comfort of unconditional love and care passing between them. The woman's eyes welled up with tears, and Shaquille felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't expected the raw emotion that the hug seemed to stir up in both of them. The embrace lasted for a few moments longer than either of them had expected, and when they finally pulled apart, neither of them said a word. There was no need to. Everything had been conveyed in that simple, powerful gesture. Shaquille sat back down beside her, his heart full. He wasn't sure what it was about this moment that had touched him so deeply. Maybe it was the vulnerability in her eyes, the quiet pain that had lingered in her words. Maybe it was the way she had so willingly accepted his compassion, the way it had reminded him that sometimes all it takes to heal a person is to be there, to truly listen, and to show kindness without expectation. The woman, her voice now steady but still laced with emotion, spoke again. I haven't felt that kind of warmth in so long. Shaquille smiled warmly. I know life isn't always easy, and sometimes it just takes a little help from someone to make things a bit better. If there's anything I can do to make your life easier, I'd be more than happy to help. Shaquille noticed the shift in the woman's mood after the hug, the way she seemed to settle into a space of comfort that she hadn't experienced in a long time. He could feel a weight lifting in the air between them, but at the same time, he couldn't ignore the subtle signs of her continued struggle. She was fragile, yes, but there was something else beneath her calm demeanor, something that hinted at the hardships she carried. Where are you headed? Shaquille asked gently, breaking the quiet moment. The woman looked up at him, her eyes softening, as she seemed to take a moment before answering. I'm going to the clinic, she said with a sigh, her voice quiet. For my foot. It's been hurting a lot lately. I've been trying to ignore it, but it's getting harder. She winced slightly as she adjusted her position, and Shaquille could see how much effort it took for her to even sit comfortably. That doesn't sound easy, Shaquille responded, his voice filled with concern. How long have you been dealing with it? Months, she said, her eyes downcast. But I can't afford much, so I've been putting off going to the doctor, and it's getting worse. She shook her head, as if frustrated with herself for not being able to do more. Shaquille's heart ached for her. He could tell that this was just another layer of the many struggles she had faced in her life. Yet, despite it all, she maintained a certain grace, a quiet resilience that made her seem even stronger. He admired her strength, but he also couldn't ignore the vulnerability that was now evident in her words. Without thinking much, Shaquille reached into his hoodie pocket, pulling out a small wad of cash. It wasn't a lot, but it was something. He folded the bills into his hand and held them out to her. I know this isn't much, Shaquille said, his voice kind but firm. But here, it's just a small gift to help with your medication or whatever you need. I hope it helps you get what you need for your foot. The woman's eyes widened in surprise as she looked at the money in his hand. She didn't immediately take it, as though the gesture was so unexpected she didn't know how to respond. Shaquille, sensing her hesitation, continued. He said, a reassuring smile on his face, I will be happy if you receive it. I just want to help in whatever small way I can. You've been through a lot, and you deserve some help. The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she smiled through them. I never thought anyone would offer me help like this. I don't know how to thank you. Shaquille nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction in this simple act of kindness. I'm just happy to help. he replied. "If I can do something to make it a little easier for you, then I will." The train slowed as it approached the next stop, but neither of them seemed to be in any rush to leave. Shaquille could sense the woman's quiet contemplation. He could feel the weight of the years she had lived, of the loss and loneliness she had endured. It was clear that she had never expected a random stranger to care, let alone someone with Shaquille's level of recognition. But the truth was, Shaquille had lived enough to know that fame and wealth didn't guarantee happiness. They often isolated people more than they brought them together. It wasn't about what you had. It was about what you gave. And right now, he wanted to give this woman a sense of hope, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The elderly woman was starting to feel a bit better, her posture less tense, her face softening as the conversation continued. But Shaquille wasn't going to let this moment pass without taking further action. He had spent much of his life on the court, playing in front of millions, but nothing in his career had ever felt quite as significant as the conversation he was having now. As the train doors opened at the next station, Shaquille stood up, preparing to exit at his stop, but he turned to her one last time. "We'll keep in touch," he said, offering her a reassuring smile. "Take care of yourself, and remember, you're not alone." As the doors closed and the train started to pull away, Shaquille felt a sense of peace settle over him. The world outside may have been chaotic, but in this small moment, he had made a difference in someone's life, and that was worth more than any basketball game or trophy he could ever win. As the train rumbled along the tracks, Shaquille couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper had transpired during his conversation with the elderly woman. The few moments they had shared seemed to stretch beyond the confines of a brief subway ride. The story of Shaquille O'Neal is not only a testament to kindness, but also a reminder of the importance of humility in life. Despite being a basketball legend, famous all over the world, Shaquille does not need the attention or recognition of the public to perform good deeds. It is the simplicity and humility in his small action that people truly admire. When Shaquille saw the elderly woman, he did not think about impressing or attracting the attention of others. He simply noticed someone who needed help and acted immediately, without having to think long-term. In a world where fame and success are often measured by achievements and titles, Shaquille O'Neal shows that the true value of a person does not lie in recognition or the spotlight. It is in such small moments that people show their good nature. Besides, this story also shows that positive changes in society do not always come from big or noisy actions. Every small action will contribute to building a stronger and warmer community. Try looking around and helping those in need. Whether it is a seat on the train, a word of encouragement in difficult times, or just sharing in lonely moments. Have you ever done a good deed without anyone knowing or recognizing it? How did it make you feel? Share it in the comments section to let us know. Thank you for watching the video. Please like and follow us if you like it. Hope to see you in the next videos.